Hey, we've had a wonderful theme of travel and adventure and wanderlust, but our speaker today could probably speak for 5 or 6 hours because he's had such an adventurous life. Reverend Bill McDonald is the author of numerous books. They're back there on the table that you can buy some later. But he talks about his metaphysical life journey, from near-death experiences to various out-of-body and supernatural and mysterious events. He includes his time in combat. He was a Huey helicopter pilot, and where he was the crew chief door gunner. And he shares stories of his many trips later in life to India, where he encountered many great, powerful, holy men and mysterious beings. He talks about love and miracles and the many sacred things that he's discovered in his 7+ decades of life. He also has a ton of medals. He could probably hardly walk with all of the Purple Heart and all these other medals that he has. And he's dedicating his time now to working with veterans, and he does this in a way that he does it completely in a volunteer way. I can't wait to hear what he has to say, and I hope we have time at the end for some Q&A, because I'm sure we'll all be just desperate to ask our questions. Please welcome Reverend Bill McDonald.
And to follow on that note, I can't wait to see what I say either. I've never given a talk anywhere in the last 20, 30 years that has been scripted, notes, prepared, or presented in any manner or looked like it was organized. I usually go early. In case you're wondering what I was doing wandering around, it's intentional. I'm picking up who you are. And I got to be honest with you, I am humbled. I am humbled to be in the presence of this group of souls today. I'm very serious. You guys are serious seekers, and I hope I rise to your level of achievement someday when I grow up. Now, it was coming to me because people were talking about Los Angeles. I was thinking about Los Angeles when I was sitting here. I came to Los Angeles back in 1990 for a Self-Realization Fellowship Conference, a convocation. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the organization. And I had an ex-monk that I was helping out financially and place to stay and everything, and he was grateful. And so he wanted to buy me a dinner or lunch. So we went from the Hotel Bonaventure to an Indian restaurant. On the way back, we're walking down the street, and there's this young homeless guy, real grubby, dirty fingernails, everything, just homeless person. And he walks up to my friend right in his face and goes, "January 27th, 1954. And I'm going, and my friend just kind of gets ashen. And I go, "What's that all about?" And he says, "That's my birthday." I'm going, okay, let's cross the street now. Okay. All right. So we cross the street, and there's this most beautiful black man that's over there, and he's got an open case, instrument case, where he has a saxophone. And he's got the saxophone there, and there's some coins in there. And I walk up to him, and I said, "Do you take requests?" He says, "Try me." And I said, "Can you play Amazing Grace," which is my favorite song? And he goes, "I don't know, I've never done it before, but I'll try." So he takes the sax, and he starts playing a rendition, jazz version, of Amazing Grace. I've never heard anything like it in my entire life. And it's on the corner where the metro, is that what you call the subway thing, the metro? There's steps going down, people are coming up, and there's a four-way corner, and he starts playing, and the people walking up from the subway stop. And the people in the street, they ignore the lights. All the traffic stopped. Everybody's listening to this guy play. It's the most fantastic version of Amazing Grace I've ever heard in my life. And I'm just standing there with my mouth open, and he's playing. And it's just everybody, and we're talking about Los Angeles, where they've seen and done everything, right? Everybody's just standing on the street. Nobody's moving. Nobody's rushing. The cars have stopped. And he plays for like 3 minutes. And he gets through, and I go, wow, that was moving. So I throw some money in there, and I asked him, I said, "Here, play it again," as I'm walking back to the hotel. So he plays it again. So I get home, and I meet my daughter, and I said, hey, I want to tell you about something that happened. She says, wait a minute, that happened on Thursday? I go, yeah. And I start to talk. She goes, no, that happened at 1 o'clock? And I go, yeah, exactly 1 o'clock. She says, let me tell you what happened to me. I was driving with my boyfriend at the time, and we were driving along, and I was trying to get a country and western station. Realized I live up in Sacramento area. We're trying to get a country and western station on the radio, and we come across this musical version of Amazing Grace, and it was so moving. We're talking, she was a teenager. It was so moving that we parked into a parking lot, turned off the car, and just listened to it. Now, when you get two young people driving around in a car, just pull over and listen to Amazing Grace. Exactly the same time I'm listening to it in Southern California. I thought, well, that's kind of neat. That's interesting. So she goes, oh, Dad, can you help me? I got to take my car and get it serviced. I said, okay, let's hop in my truck. We'll go pick up your car. And she turns on my radio, and there on the radio, at random, is Amazing Grace playing. I mean, how many times you turn on a radio and Amazing Grace is on? Not every day, right? So the sequences of events in our lives sometime, they're not, I was going to say they're not unnatural. Some people say they're not natural. I'm saying they are natural. And if you're in tune with the universe, if you wake up every day, and Ted knows what I'm talking about, if you wake up every day with the intentions to love and serve and not get in the way of God, because you are not the server. You're not even the lover. You're just a conduit for that energy to come through. For example, somebody asked me when I first came in here, what was this event that happened most recently? Somebody was talking to me this morning. There you go. On something that just sequentially happened. Well, this last weekend, I had a visitor from Germany at my house, a guy I used to meditate with. And I told him, I said, we got to get up really early in the morning because we have to be, we have to be at the Golden Gate Bridge at 8 o'clock in the morning. And he kind of looks at me like, sure, okay. I go, no, we got to be there. So you got to get up. So we get up early, we drive. It's about 2 hours from Sacramento. And we get there to the north side of the bridge, and I pull up on this hill, and I get out, and we walk in the rain and in the fog. We're standing up on top of the hill looking down at the towers. And he's kind of looking at me like, why are we here? And I go, we took some pictures. And I go, hey, that guy over here, there's a lonely-looking guy about 58, maybe 60 years old. And he's standing there in the fog and the rain. He's just kind of, with his shoulders kind of, you could tell something's troubling him. And I go, take our picture. Here's my camera. So he takes our pictures. And then he pulls out his phone to show me this beautiful woman, about 30 years old. That's his daughter, who's got stage 4 cancer. And she was in Mill Valley. And he got up when he goes into this whole story about it. He got up that morning, and everybody was asleep, and he snuck out of the house, and he came down the bridge just to think. Because he's this staunch Catholic. And the thought that his daughter wasn't Catholic and not going to have last rites and not, do anything with the Catholic religion, and he felt like he's failed as a father and she was going to go to hell, I guess. And so we spent the next 45 minutes discussing spirituality. And I said, well, she's spiritual. And he goes, well, that's what she says. She's spiritual. I said, she needs you to accept her. That's why you're here. Anyway, he broke down, started getting teary-eyed, gave me a super hug, and then says, now I know why I came. So he listened. I listened. The universe delivers. The trouble with both of us, we don't really listen. So how do you listen? Through silence. There's 2 ways to communicate: listening and talking. Everybody prays, that's talking. Lord, I need a new Mercedes-Benz, right? Cure my grandma, she's only 106 and she's dying, please save her. Right? We think of God as Santa Claus. And God help us if we have any pain or suffering. We don't deserve it. We know more than God. But if you wake up every morning and you meditate, silence those thoughts, and in that quiet, you are then able to hear at some level, even if it's just the heart chakra, you'll know what you're supposed to do that day. And I start every morning and every night. When I get through with my meditation, I pray. And I have this long list of people. It takes me almost an hour and a half to 2 hours to visualize and pray for everybody that's on my list. But I visualize them in this rainbow light, healing energy. And I don't tell God what to do with it. I just say, bless them. Somebody's suffering with pain, somebody's sick. I'm not asking them to be cured. I'm asking them to have courage, comfort, faith, trust, and love in their heart. I figure God will do the rest because we don't know really what everybody's karma is. So each of you, when you start your day, the one thing you should do, you should be asking yourself, what am I going to do to serve today? Because I've come to the conclusion after 70-some years of life that there is no other purpose but love. Love. Why are you here? And it was pointed out earlier to me, and I reflect the same value, but you said it perfectly. It's not about being loved. It's not about who loves you. In the end, it only matters who you loved. Because you can't control what other people are going to do. Some people love you because they're going to inherit something. You're going to give them something. You're the boss, whatever. That's not love. But it doesn't matter. What did you do? Who did you help? And everybody can do something because prayers do work. And I've had some great examples of that. I had a boss who treated me really, really terrible. Instead of getting angry and mad and everything, I just let it go and I prayed for this woman. And then I went someplace else and she continued. And it was 18 years later I ran into her. And I got the biggest hug and everything for her. So I spent 18 years praying for this woman, visualizing love and everything in her life. And then when I met her, there was no anger, hate from her at all anymore. It was like she was just so happy to see me. She didn't even know why. But we know why. Because the love in her is the same love that's in me. It's the same love that's in each one of you. Now, just somebody last night, I believe you were telling me maybe I should kind of tell them where I've been so they know the journey a little bit. But most people are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, right? All kinds of neat things happen. Now, those who have read my book or have heard me talk sometime in the past, you realize that when I was born, my mother went into the hospital and she's already had several kids. And she told me, I'm getting ready to deliver. They said, no, you're not. You got to get an enema first. I already know where this story's going. It's pretty crappy. So, needless to say, I was born headfirst into a bedpan. So, from that point onward, life has been an upward journey. But if you're talking about humble beginnings, I challenge anybody here to have more humble beginning than that. When I grew up, I graduated high school. 24 hours after I graduated high school, I was on an airplane flying to the Hawaiian Islands because that's where my heart was at. I knew I had to be there. I had a one-way ticket. I had $40. Now, we're talking 1964. $40 wasn't much even then. And I had a dream. And next thing you know, a couple days later, I meet this kahuna, Hawaiian religion. He was like the eminent guy, David K. Bray. I was taken care of. I was fed. I got jobs. Everything happened. And when I came back, and then I went to Europe, bummed around Europe, and everywhere I went in Europe, and I only had $150 in Europe and spent the whole summer, I knew that I'd be provided for. When I had a little bit of money in my pocket, I was a little more chintzy, but once I was down to nothing, everything happened. I was at a metro station in Paris, and I was trying to figure out how to get out of town. because I wanted to go to the coast and catch a boat and go home. So I asked this young man, I said, I tried to talk to him, and he goes, my mother speaks English, come with me. So he brings me to her house. It's a penthouse apartment and overlooking the Arch of Triumph. And it's beautiful. I mean, it's like a millionaire place. And she comes in and she sees this grubby hitchhiker, me, right? And she has a maid take me in, draw a bath, takes all my clothes, washes them, washes all my clothes, all this stuff, irons everything. I haven't even asked my question. All I know is how to get out of town. So then they had me sit down at a table and have 7-course meal where you ring a little bell, and a maid comes in. They had an English maid. The French have English maids. And this thing went on. It was just, and pretty soon the evening comes and she goes, well, we don't have time to talk about your question. We'll talk in the morning. I said, okay. So I stayed the night. The next day they gave me a tour of the city and breakfast and everything. Then they finally asked me what I wanted, and then they pointed me in the direction. And I said, this is really great. I had breakfast, lunch, dinner, everything was taken care of. I had no money. And I got on the road and I'm thinking, okay, I've had breakfast, now I need lunch. So as soon as I had that thought, I knew that I was going to have lunch. So I'm hitchhiking, next guy picks me up, he offers me a big piece of French bread and some cheese, and, I had my lunch. So he drops me off, and I'm in this little town along the Seine River. And I sit down, it's about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I'm going, okay, God, you got me here. I'm your guest. I got no money. That's no problem. I expect to have a place to stay tonight. I expect to have dinner. And I ain't asking anybody. I'm giving you 3 minutes. All right, so me and God got a special relationship. So about 2.5 minutes, this most beautiful young French woman comes. She was a school teacher, and black skirt, black top, turtleneck, right? Black stockings, whatever they are, a beret. I mean, it was just like in the movies. And she comes up to me, and I'm like 20 years old, 19 years old. And she goes, something in French to me, and I didn't understand. And she goes, what are you doing here? I said, I'm waiting. So I'm not going to ask. I'm waiting. She says, waiting for what? I said, I'm waiting. She says, well, you got a place to stay? No. I will. You got any food? I will. She says, you're crazy. Come with me. So she takes me to this public building where they're having a city council meeting, and the mayor's up there. And she says something. She goes up there, she says, stand back here at the end of the hall. And she's talking to everybody on stage, and they all look at me, and the whole group of people in the town all turn around and look at me, and blah, blah. Next thing you know, a sea captain's wife with 10 kids was told by the mayor to take me to her house and take care of me. So I go, and I'm fed, I'm wined, literally wined. I'd rather had water, but they gave me wine. I'm not a drinker. But one thing after another. Finally, after spending several weeks there, trying to tell them I just want to get to the next town, the port, finally they gave me transportation. I go to the next town, and I'm in a town where I don't know anybody. I come in, this whole town escorted me there, and they introduced me to a husband-wife that survived D-Day. Their house was right there on the cliff by the beach. And they were telling me this story about how they were scared, but they were so happy at the same time, because explosions and everything all around them, but how terrible it was under the Nazis. And then they broke down and cried because they said they've been waiting, and they brought a bottle of wine out, and they've been waiting. This was 1965, so what's that? That's like the 20th anniversary. I was June 5th, I think, at their house, right? And they go, you're here for the 20th anniversary. And we had this bottle of wine back then. So it was old, right? And we've been saving this because what we wanted to do was to celebrate our liberation with one of the veterans. And she says, you're our symbolic American. And she says, we got the feeling that maybe you feel a connection. And so they took me on a tour of the graveyards and everything. And while I'm walking around the military graveyards, which unfortunately there's a lot of stones, I have a vision. And I see this low-ranking enlisted man, private or whatever, and he's getting off one of the landing crafts, and he's getting hit with bullets, and he's tumbling around in the surf, and he's drowning. And I'm picking up this suffocating and drowning feeling, and I feel for this guy, because the guy, he wanted to be a hero. He wanted to liberate France. And he never even set shore. He died before he even got onto the beach. And I identified with him at some level. Either I was experiencing what he was experiencing, or that was me, I don't know which. But it was so real. I went through everything he went through. And these people were standing there just kind of watching me. And then I got kind of a funny smile from both of them, so I didn't have to even tell them what was going on. They apparently guessed. But we don't know when we travel places what's going to happen. People were up here talking about traveling. When you have your heart chakra open, and you're open-minded, and you trust people. I trusted that God, no matter what happened to me, if I had no money at all, I was not going to starve. I was not going to be abandoned. God loved me. Why would he take care of me? And that's the way I've approached life, with everything I do. And when I was in Vietnam, I went there. First off, I went to Self-Realization Fellowship because I was a member since 1946. And I said, is this okay? I mean, I'm going out there to go to war. Is that? And so they told me about Yogananda, how he blessed the troops when they went and took, troops in and fed them and encouraged them to go. And SRF does not give draft deferments. They do not give any draft deferments, not even to their own monks. So I said, oh, okay. I didn't want to violate any kind of, spiritual laws or anything. So when I was in Vietnam, there was a sense, more than a sense, there was a knowing that I was going to be okay, regardless of what happened. So everybody says, oh, I come back and I got all these medals and stuff. Oh, you're so brave. No, it's not being brave or courageous when you know what's going to happen. And you're protected. That's not bravery. That's just trusting God. So when I first got to the company, a lot of unique things happened. One of those is what I call the spiritual armor story. If those have maybe watched a video on it or so. Anybody watch that video, Spiritual Armor? Oh, good. This is a good story to tell. I've been flying for about 6 months, crew chief door gunner, meaning I'm sitting on a canvas seat, nothing in front of me except open space. It's open. There's no door, nothing. So anybody shooting at a guy on a helicopter, it's shooting ducks. So I've been there the whole time, and finally somebody come up to me, and they said, hey, Mac, because of McDonald, they call you Mac in the Army. Mac, he says, somebody gave us these really terrible chest protectors. They're made out of ceramics. They're about 20 pounds each plate, in front and the back. Nobody wants them. You want to try them out? Yeah, okay, I'll give it a try. So I figured out it's being offered to me for a reason. So I take one, I put it on the front. My gunner on the other side of the helicopter puts one on his front. And we take the back one, and we put it underneath the canvas seat to protect various parts of the body. All right? And third day flying with this, we get a call to go out and assist where they just had 9 helicopters shot up really bad. They all had to leave. Gunships all left. And so when we got out there, we were the only people in the sky. There was 500 North Vietnamese regular troops on the ground fighting a very small group of South Vietnamese Rangers. We're talking about 500. We're talking about uniformed guys, which was unusual in Vietnam. I mean, usually you didn't see that. So we had the commander for the ground troops for the South Vietnamese. And so we had to come in and land, let this guy off so he could command his troops, which meant we're coming down out of the sky in the middle of this battle. One helicopter, nobody protecting us. And then on the radio comes on, tell your gunners not to fire any rounds. There's friendlies on the ground. Do not return any fire. So we're looking at each other. Okay, that's great for somebody in Saigon to make that decision, but now I can't even shoot back. So now we're coming down, and you got to go slow when you land, and we're hovering in, and all of a sudden the entire world opens up. I mean, we're talking thousands of rounds, literally thousands of rounds of ammo coming up there. There's white tracers, there's yellow tracers, all kinds of tracers. And I could hear this little pluck, 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 where it hits the body of the helicopter. And then I'm feeling this whoosh, 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 as it goes through the entire helicopter. So we're taking heavy hits. We're leaking oil, we're leaking gas, we're leaking everything. We hit the ground. This commander gets out. And it turns out, I don't know if you've heard stories, but not all these South Vietnamese guys were loyal to their, a lot of them were double agents. Here's the guy that was actually working for the other side. He gets out, and he gets from about here to you, right there. And he turns around with a automatic weapon, AK-47. He's got 18-round clip. And he opens up with 18 rounds. And I just turn around, and I see this guy taking aim at me. And just light coming at me. And all of a sudden, I hit right square in the heart, one round. It knocks me back up against the helicopter, the wall. And the cord for my radio, for my helmet, breaks. So all of a sudden, I get hit. I look down, I got smoke. I got fire coming out of my chest, and I got a super bruise. You get something that stops a bullet, it still hurts, trust me. It still hurts. Anyway, so I'm boom, and all of a sudden it's dead quiet. I go, well, that wasn't too hard getting killed. That's no big deal. So I think I'm dead, right? Anyway, so meanwhile, we get up, we go about a football field away, about 100 yards, and we have an unscheduled landing in the middle of a field, and the helicopter's all falling apart. And so I get out and realize I'm alive. It was always a good feeling. And I open up the doors, I get the pilots out, and then when I go to the other side, the gunner, the door gunner on the other side, is slumped over his M60 machine gun, and there's just blood flowing. 17 holes on his side of the aircraft. In other words, the guy fires 18 rounds at me. One hits me in the heart. 17 go through. Except the trouble is this, if anybody knows anything about helicopters, there's a transmission. There's two walls. There's no way in the world those bullets, even if they were fired straight through my side, where there was no entry holes. No entry holes on my side. Only exit holes on the other side, and they were an exact profile of where I was sitting on the other side. So I threw him over my shoulder, and I go running through the jungle. And believe it or not, that sounds heroic, but I tell you what, your adrenaline is kicking. It's not that hard to, 150-pound guy, you put him on your shoulder and you're running. But I tell you what, I'm now 73 years old and I still feel the back because it did my back in. You're running with somebody full gallop. It's not good for your back. Anyway, so we get there, and a gunship comes in. It's a small aircraft, small helicopter, and it takes the commander, who was a major, and it took the wounded guy, because he was really wounded. I was wounded in the hand, but nobody cared. And they left. They go, there's no more room. I go, what do you mean there's no more room? What do you mean there's no, throw a chair out, throw something out, right? So they left, and it was about 8 hours later. We're down to, so we spent 8 hours, 500 North Vietnamese, and me and this pilot. He was a captain, and he had a 45. And I said, you know what? I went to the helicopter, and I pulled off an M60 machine gun. And I took 2,000 round belt of ammo, and I put it in there. And I had a belt of ammo was made up of, instead of one tracer for every 5 rounds, it was solid tracer. So when it fired, it looked like World III was coming. And I went out there and I put it on my hip because that's what I seen John Wayne do, right? John Wayne, he puts it on his hip and he walks out in the jungle. And I start firing. I attack 500 guys. Now, looking back upon it, that's not a rational thing to do. But the irrational thing shook up these 500 guys. They thought they were dealing with a crazy guy. And they didn't, I mean, it was like they scattered. So anyway, that day, it's a long story short, we finally got rescued. I was put in for Silver Star, which nobody gave me. That's another whole story. I was nominated for Silver Star, but my commanding officer said, I don't have one. Why should one of my men have one? He's the guy that left the aircraft, left me there. So anyway, we get back to base, and the Army sends out these special investigators to look at the aircraft. What are they looking at? And they're looking at the holes, they're measuring, the strings going. Nobody could figure out how you could fire 18 rounds at somebody sitting there, and the guy on the other side gets the 17 rounds there, and 1 round stops there. Now, the next week, I get orders, because my helicopter was down, to fly another aircraft. I said, okay. So I go over and I touch the skin of the helicopter, and as soon as I touched it, I knew that it was going to crash and burn. I saw this whole vision of everybody dead, lots of bodies, everybody on fire. And so I tried to tell, something's wrong with this helicopter. I says, something's wrong with the rotor head, or something's wrong. This thing's going to crash and burn. Of course, in the Army, they don't like that. It's, I couldn't show them. So for anybody that's into aircrafts, you're into aircrafts, but in the Army, you got logbooks, and you can red X an aircraft. Something wrong with it, you red X it so nobody flies it, and then a mechanic has to sign it off. And that's what I did. And they said, well, you're the mechanic, sign it off. And I said, no. I said, this thing's going to crash and burn. I want experts to come in. And they sent all these guys in. Nobody could find nothing wrong with it. So I go back to the barracks, and a new guy just came in. His name was Al Durrell, who I met some of his family members here just in the last few years. It's interesting. This is 1967. And as soon as I met him and I shook his hand, I started crying. I go, whatever you do. It's his first day, his first hour in the company. He hadn't even flown anything yet. I said, whatever you do, don't go out on that aircraft. Because if you do, you're never coming back. You're dead. And he goes, man, this crazy guy. So I went to the commanding officer and I told him not to let that aircraft fly. And he told me he's in charge. They don't tell him what to do. And I said, well, I'll tell you. He says, well, I'm going to court-martial you because I'm giving you an order. And I said, okay, you do whatever you want to do, and I'll fly on something else tomorrow. But don't fly on that. So I come back next day and it's not there. It's gone. They took it out. It's 5 hours late. Now, it's only got 2 hours worth of fuel. How could it be 5 hours late, right? So the commanding officer comes to me and he says, well, you know so much, McDonald. Where's it at? And I just kind of point. He says, okay, come on with us. So they had no idea where it was at either. So we fly for about 45, 50 minutes, and there we see this big blazing jungle on fire. And there's the crash, just like I saw and told everybody. And they were all dead. Now, what's interesting on that is when I got back for 3 days, they interrogated me, seeing if I had something to do with sabotaging it, because nobody could know that it was going to crash and who was going to get killed. And so they kind of kept me hanging for 40-some years that I was under investigation. Finally, I get a call, and on my phone it says Langley, Virginia. This was just a few years ago. And they had a file. I go, what do you mean you got a file? Yeah, we got a file on you. I go, well, what's this about? He said, well, we're trying to figure out how you did this and this. We've been following your career in the military and stuff. I go, well, what does it say? Oh, we can't tell you. It's classified. I said, well, it's my life, right? He says, yeah. If you send for it, everything will be redacted except for your name. So apparently what I gathered was they were trying to duplicate all these things I was doing in Nam, and there's a bunch of stories if you read my book, with money and engineering. And I tried to tell the guy, I said, look, you fly me to Langley, and I'll give a meditation class and let you guys raise your Kundalini energy, and maybe you guys can figure out how to do this. Nah. Anyway, so when I got back from Vietnam, I've kind of made it a point to take care of other veterans. And I was talking to some people here earlier where they see what's happening to veterans. But, it's not just veterans, because we were talking about suicides, 22 a day and everything, but there's other young people out there. And I'm looking at that too. Old people, we're taking care of ourselves. But we got an epidemic out there of young people. How much time do I got? I got time for one more story?
Yeah, and then we have about 10 minutes for
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay. This was a young person's story, but he's not young anymore, and I still pray for him. I call it the hitchhiker story, if anybody's ever watched the video on that. I had a feeling, again, going with the feeling, that I got to help somebody. Somebody's waiting for me, and I keep getting this Bible passage about, helping people. Beware that the stranger may be an angel in disguise, that passage. And every time I went to a bookstore or opened a magazine, that quote would be there. And I'm going, what is this? So I knew that I had to do something. So I went to work, and I was working for the Postal Service and Safety Management. And it was like 10 o'clock or something in the morning. And I just tell my boss, I'm going home. Not I'm sick, I'm taking vacation, nothing. And nobody asks me why. Nobody questions me. Nobody stops me. I just say, I'm going home. I'm leaving. I didn't even offer a reason. And I left. I'm driving down the road because I know I had to be on the road. And I see this young guy, it turns out he's 22 years old, and he's hitchhiking alongside the road. And he's really grubby. He's got a T-shirt on. He's got socks on his hands for gloves. And he's got what I call a Scooby-Doo beard. Ever see a guy try to grow a beard and they got a couple of hairs here and there? Scooby-Doo. And so I pull over and I said, where are you going? And he goes, I'm going to Texas. Well, this is Sacramento. I said, well, I'm only going down the road about 5 miles, but I tell you what, hop in. I get him in there and he tells me the story about how he was living with he was a foster kid, and then he was living with his grandmother until she died on him. And now he was trying to find the only person in his life that he knew about, and that was his stepdad. Not even his dad, it was his stepdad in Texas. He had no money, nothing. And that night, that morning, I picked him up. He'd been sleeping in a field with no tent, and the rain poured, and it soaked and wrecked his sleeping bag. You get one of those sleeping bags, they get wet, and he had no jacket. So I said, okay, just stay in the car. So I bring him home, and my wife, my daughter look at this guy. Of course, he smells. He's been on the road for a couple of weeks. And so I take him in, give him a shower. I launder his clothes. I dig out all extra clothes that I think will fit him. I give him a backpack. I give him a tent. I give him camping equipment. I give him money. I get food. I pack this bag up so he could survive. He comes out, I feed him, and he's sitting there and he keeps staring at me. And he tells me this story. He says, last night, he says, when I was extremely low emotionally, he was suicidal, but he was kind of fumbling with the words. And I was going to throw it in, it wasn't worth it. He says, last night, a guy that looked exactly like you came to me in that field and told me, and I stopped him, God loves you. And then he broke down and cried, right? He says, what's going on? I said, when I give you this, you'll understand. I opened a drawer, and there was a pack of sugarless gum that was half gone. And I said, when I give you this, you'll understand everything. And I gave it to him. I go, what a stupid thing. My daughter's like, why are you giving it? I don't know why I gave it to him, but I gave it to him. And he looked at it and he says, yeah, it's exactly what the man in my dream gave me. Now, I've prayed for that man since 1990. I prayed for him this morning. He's an adult someplace, and he's still worthy of my love. He crossed my path, and I don't cross anybody off my path. He came to me for a reason. So think about the people in your own life. Who's crossed your path? Maybe there was some guy in a corner, a homeless guy, or some foster kid, or maybe just some old boss or somebody, a neighbor. Everyone needs to be loved. Everybody needs to be prayed for. You don't have to tell them anything. You don't have to tell them you're praying for them. You don't have to tell them you love them. Anyway, I could go on, as you said earlier, about 5 hours. But
we have about 10 minutes for Q&A.
Sure.
Do we need a microphone? Larry's got it.
Larry's got it. All right.
Who has a question?
And if I don't have the correct answer, I'll make it up, and you won't know any difference. No.
Well, it'll be great either way. I did watch a number of your videos on YouTube, and you had one story that I thought was really great many stories that were really great, but about your trip to India and then being guided to the gentleman with who looked up your destiny. Let's put it that way. So that was a wonderful story.
Yeah, and he's talking about having a naughty palm reading done. And the first time somebody asked, the guru goes, "I'm giving you an order. I want you to go get your naughty palm." I thought, I don't need a palm reader, right? I don't need a soothsayer. But apparently a naughty palm reading back 2,500 to 5,000 years ago in India, the great rishis, kind of like enlightened masters, the great rishis wrote down and channeled this information for people to come in the future. I'm talking about back in 1800s and 1900s. I mean, all kinds of years, even into the future. I don't know how far. And if you're destined to get it, it's waiting for you. And so I heard, okay, great. So I asked the guru, I says, well, how do I find it? He says, well, first off, you got to realize that they spread these scrolls out over like 20 locations or something so they all don't get lost. And I said, which one do you know to go to? He says, I'm telling you to go to Pune. I said, okay. I said, well, how are they going to find it, the name? He says, well, it's your thumbprint. Right thumbprint for man, left thumbprint for woman. And he says, there's 108 different variations of squirrels and lines and stuff in a thumbprint that could be classified. Kind of like astrology. You got 12 signs. Well, thumbprint's got 108. Okay, that only narrows it down to about 1 million probably. But then, so you go in there, you give your thumbprint, you don't tell them who you are. You go into a room, and they know you. And you only answer yes or no to their questions. And if it's no, that's not you, then they go to another reading. But yeah, 40 questions, 40 yeses. And I thought it was, he knew my name, knew my father's name, my mother's name, my wife's name, my date of birth. They stumbled on my time of birth. He goes, well, we know you're born March 16th, 1946. He says, but for some reason, he says, I don't understand this, but you're born between 105 or 110 and 125 or something. We're not exactly sure. So I forgive him because not even my doctor, remember I was born in the pan? Not even my doctors knew what time I was born. They took a guess. So that was interesting that the Vedic chart took a guess as well. Anyway, sometime when I got more time, that's a real deeper subject because they made about umpteen predictions of which 90-some% of them have actually factualized and happened in my life. It's some major, major stuff. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I just really appreciate hearing all your stories. You've obviously lived a life of tremendous trust in the universe, right? Trust in larger powers, right? And it seems like that has been what your life has been about, is just living a life of incredible trust. And the idea of giving love is really interesting because I do believe that most of us are here to give love. And in my therapy room, I often come across mostly women who are unable to receive love. And so I'm very much a believer in the principle of reciprocity, is that we need to do both, right? And so sometimes we become, we develop this thought that it's only about giving love. But in my world, it's about both, right? Can I receive love and can I give love? So both of those are sort of like the yin-yang symbol of wholeness and unity. If I can give, I can also receive. And so that principle of reciprocity has been really, really important to me in my own life as well.
Actually, that's a lesson most of us don't learn. When I had skin cancer, the face was so bad, big chunks of my face were falling off. If you read my book, I think I talk about it. I was off from July of whatever year it was until January something of the following year because I was so hideous. I looked like Frankenstein. It's healed. I also had my nose cut off, everything else. But when I was off work, group self-realization fellowship, the prayer thing, everybody sent me all these lovely prayers and stuff, And at first it was like, nah. And then I realized they were getting something out of praying for me too. And for me to deny them the right to give me love and prayers, who the heck do I think I am? Because if you don't receive the gifts that others are giving, how does anybody else get, their joyous karma from giving gifts? You can't just be the giver. You can't just be the teacher. That's ego. And I know I've been there. In fact, I'm probably still in that hole. But everybody's a teacher. Everybody's a student. Everybody's a giver and everybody's a receiver. And if you don't do giving and receiving, then you've stopped the flow of energy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question. Yeah,
Thank you. I just want to thank you so much. You touched my heart, and my soul loves your soul. And I just wanted to tell you that I'm interested as a grandmother. What role did your parents play in your spiritual development? Because perhaps they're the ones that introduced you to Self-Realization Fellowship. But I'd like to know what part I can play in the children in my life to bring them to be more aware of a God consciousness.
First off, if you read my book, you're going to say, wow, he didn't start with a great set of parents. But that's what I needed. They who were they were, they gave what they got. No resentment on my part. And as you point out, my mother was in Self-Realization Fellowship in the 40s. If nothing else, she gave me meditation. She gave me faith and trust in God. And she set my life on a course. She taught me right from wrong. And she had her own issues. Well, she's a human being. So as a grandparent, most especially, think of yourself more as a godmother, godfather. That's really the role you should take on. Stop taking them to Disneyland and take them to a temple. Take them on a nature walk. Spend time, quiet time with them. These kids have got too much stuff. Stuff. They don't need more gifts of stuff. They don't need any more activities. They need inactivity, quiet. We're not teaching children to be quiet. Their idea is to sit around quiet is to do our video game. Anyway, bless all of you. And before I go, let's just do one thing before I go. I want all you to close your eyes. I want you to kind of visualize a rainbow of light manifesting itself in this room. I hope that's not one of you. And the reason I said that because it listed a laugh. When you laugh, your spiritual defenses go down. Great joy. Let's picture this rainbow light circulating above all of us, coming through our crown chakra, running through all our chakras. A healing, loving, forgiving, embracing love of light. Almost like this rainbow is liquid, because it is. And when I meditate tonight, I'll be visualizing everybody in this room, and that's exactly the way I'm going to visualize it, with this energy coming into all of you. And I'm asking each of you, from this moment on, pick somebody or somebody's in your life that you visualize this healing rainbow light come into their crown chakra and into their heart chakra. And just give them love. Be that door for them. God bless.